Hi, I am Andrea Wynn, and this is
Bryant Wynn.
and we are starting a video blog or a
Podcast.
I'm new on this terminology about our journey. It's a crazy journey, so I think that's why I'm at a loss for words because we have been on a 30-year journey because you just turned 30 in July, and Bryant was born with a very rare heart condition. And so I think it was, a few months ago?
Yeah.
That we had this discussion and kind of talked about how we felt that it would be kind of exciting to blog our journey of what it has been like to walk out numerous, I've lost count how many open heart surgeries you've had and heart casts and brain surgery.
Yeah.
He's got a metal plate going on over here. You got all kinds of stuff. He's past our age, but the $6 million man, he'd outbeat that dude by a long shot, huh?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit, I think we're going to go over today, and this is going to be a journey that if we literally blogged everything that we have been through, just surgery-wise and stuff, we could be doing this for years. But we thought that just sharing our journey of what it's like from the parent standpoint and Bryant sharing his journey just from childhood into adulthood. We don't like saying disability. I think the term that we've always used ever since he's been little is extraordinary or extra extraordinary abilities. But sharing that journey with you guys, that maybe you can get something out of our journey and maybe it would help you out a little bit. We have several friends of ours as well that we want to bring on this journey with you, that not just parents, but also adults who have extra extraordinary abilities, that we want to, throughout the weeks, interview them of what it's like to...
Yeah, and it'll be a live podcast.
Yeah, a live podcast kind of journeying what it's like to be in their skin, what it's like to journey out their life, what it's like to be a parent of a young adult or a child, the struggles. We want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
We're going to bring on, his siblings, my other children, what it's like to be in a family of, kind of raising a kid with extra problems, what that's like to be the siblings. I think a lot of times when you have a family like this, nobody, I know for me, and even you, I don't think we've ever really come across anybody with your condition that we've ever heard talk about the struggles.
Yeah, we never did.
And so we kind of learned as we went. You're going to see crazy, which we have really good sense of humor. I think we've made a joke. Not that we've really used sense of humor in a negative way per se, but I think that we've learned how to laugh things off really well, right? Because we have a crazy family.
Yeah, that's what you want to do. You want to, make jokes, but of course you want to keep them kind of in a certain way so you're not being negative about it.
Yeah, so that's good. If you don't laugh, if you take things too seriously, you would literally kind of go crazy, honestly. So we've learned how to take each day at a time, and I know even with his doctors, we learned how to just find humor and God has just placed us in a good family where we learn how to laugh and kind of have fun. So I think today, the one thing that we want to talk about is what Bryant was born with, what his condition is called, and just kind of go through what our purpose and our goal with this, what do you call it? Because I'm not real up and hip on these terms. So this is going to be a what again? A podcast / video blog. And hope that you will subscribe and come along with us on this journey. Some of you we know, some of you don't, and maybe you can comment in on questions you may have. Some of you may even have this condition. Some parents may have questions. We don't have all the answers because we're learning as we go, but we do have 30 years of experience of being in this situation. And, he has some experience. And he also has been journeying some health. He just came out of the past 2 years of going through some challenges. He just had 2 open heart surgeries back in October, and he also had another heart procedure in May, right?
Yeah, I think it was in May.
Yeah. He has a pacemaker and defibrillator that had to be changed out last year because the battery went low because of some challenges he had because he has heart rhythm issues. And so we like to also call this thing Rhythms of Grace because we've had to kind of go through some of that. We've kind of been a little out of rhythm, so we like to call it Rhythms of Grace. So just to basically start out, 30 years ago when Bryant was born, when I got married, I was told that I couldn't really have children. I don't know where they got that information from. 6 months after I married my husband, I got pregnant with Bryant. And back 30 years ago, they really didn't name things fancy like they do nowadays because they got all kinds of fancy names for your stuff that I can't even pronounce. So 30 years ago when Bryant was born, they just summed it up to complex cyanotic, which means blue, congenital heart disease. At 19 years old, when I had him, I did not even know what that meant. I just knew that it was serious because they had talked to us after Bryant was born. My husband was in the Army. He retired from the U.S. Army. We were stationed at Fort Sill at the time. And they told us that Bryant's condition was very rare and that he probably would not live past the age of 2 years old because there was several kids that was born with one situation, each of Bryant's condition, but not everything that he had at one time. And so the likelihood of Bryant living past childhood was not very good. And so that was very stressful, needless to say. And so he had a lot of surgeries at birth. However, now that he's gotten older, they applied fancy names. So the fancy names to what he has, in case anybody has this condition, one of them is called tricuspid atrasia. And I had to literally kind of write down what some of that is because you don't want my layman's terms of it because I'll confuse you. But basically what that is where the heart valve is missing or it's abnormally developed. And Bryant's heart valve, yours was abnormally developed. And so what they did with his is they went in there and put a piece of vortex. They had an option when he was born to put a pig valve. I know, right? A pig valve. How would you have felt about that if you would have got older?
Man.
But some people have that.
Yeah.
Do you think you would have went around oinking?
Maybe.
Maybe. Do you like bacon?
Don't like bacon.
I'm just kidding. You gotta joke about it. But hey, it's good. But anyway, his is not a pig valve. His is a piece of vortex because they knew that he was a newborn baby and they felt that was best to grow with his body and stretch where he wouldn't have to get it replaced all the time. And it's worked because in 30 years, you've never gotten it replaced. So that was a good call on their part.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing. He's had a numerous bunch of other surgeries, so we didn't need that. He also has what they call transposition of the great vessels. Ooh, fancy. That's a fancy name, ain't it?
Yeah.
That's kind of rare and fancy. I'm sure you'd rather have something else fancy than that. And what that is it changes the way his blood circulates in his body. And what it does is it leaves a shortage of oxygen in his body. And so we have, what I say, is there any normal person out there? I really don't think so. We always say normal people. Is anybody really normal?
No.
No. I'm not normal. Are you?
Everyone is special in their own way.
There you go. That's right. However, the average person has an oxygen saturation of 100%. But Bryant does not. Your oxygen saturation is unique. So do you want to say what yours is?
Yeah, my oxygen saturation hangs around 90, sometimes 91. And on a good day, it's 93.
Which has never happened before, by the way. He just had a procedure done in May where they put titanium coils in his heart because his body's been rerouting his own blood system. Your body's like saying, whoa, 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 I got too much pressure going on in here, so I think I'm going to reroute myself. And so they had to do 20 titanium coils back when you were like 10, and they just put some more titanium coils in May, and it upped his oxygen saturation to 93, which he's never been a day in his life. Back when he was younger, his oxygen saturation would run in the 80s. And so he's doing good now. You probably feel like a whole new person.
Yeah. And recently, the reason why I had to get the surgery is because basically the doctors, well, I had like lower oxygen for some reason. And I started walking into walls like a drunk person.
It was wild.
Yeah. And I don't know how it got like that. So they kept saying it was the flu, and then come to find out it wasn't. They put the coils in. Now I'm back at my normal range, which is excellent.
And that's a good thing too, because if you have this condition, you really have to pay attention to your body, because we kind of knew there was something not quite right. He had the past 2 years have been a huge challenge where Bryant's had a pacemaker and a defibrillator for a while now because his heart goes into ventricular tachycardia, which is a pretty severe heart arrhythmia. And for the past couple of years, it's been pretty major. And so he had his defibrillator and his pacemaker replaced. Then things happened, and about a week later, he had to have a open chest surgery to get some other things done. And then he just didn't feel quite right, but you knew that. And he was just walking around the house, walking in walls, just all kinds of crazy stuff.
And I would get out of breath fast.
Yeah.
And at one point, it was dumping like in the low 70s.
Yeah. So we kept just going back and saying, look, something's not right. He just doesn't feel good. And so you really just have to know your own body. And even as the parent of the adult, you know, even though you're more than a parent, you're the care partner. I love, we go to Charlottesville, to the hospital there, to UVA. They're awesome there. And I love those little bracelets they give you. They say that you're the care partner. And so you're more than a parent. You're helping them. And so you don't want to hover too much. You try to give him his freedom, right? You try to make your own medical decisions, but you also have to say, hey, something's not quite right.
And sometimes you got to be realistic about those medical decisions because they could save your life.
That's right. That's a good one. And he also was born without his spleen. That's called a splenia, I believe. So his spleen is not there. He was born without one. But the doctor said when he was born, that's not a big deal because when boxers get hit in their gut, they get them taken out all the time. So it's not a big deal. You just didn't get yours taken out by boxing. And none of his organs are in the right place. He has what they call situs inversus, which means everything that's on our right side is on his left and vice versa. And his heart is a little off where it's supposed to be too. His heart's turned around backwards. And so you can look all of that up online if you want to research that yourself. And he also only has one pumping chamber. He has a single ventricle. I think you might, if I'm not mistaken, you only have a 2-chambered heart. I know you definitely have a single ventricle. Mm-hmm. As I get older, I forget things because I'm just at that age where stress and hormones mess with your mind. So that sums all of that up with, that should sum it all up, right? But also, he was born with all of that heart stuff, but about 8 years ago that your brain hemorrhaged? Was that about 8 years ago?
Yeah. I believe so.
Yeah, so about 8 years ago.
Was it around like 2011 or something?
It sure was, so yeah. So eight years ago, Bryant, unrelated to his heart condition, had a brain hemorrhage. He had an aneurysm in his brain, and this boy, let me tell you, his doctors would even attest to this, and I'm hoping that somewhere along the way we can get some of his physicians to interview as well. But he has died more times than any of his physicians have ever had a patient die and come back. And so he's been resuscitated back. He has died and came back more times than anyone. I mean, I know I'm his mom, but I've never met anyone like you. And so his brain hemorrhaged. They told us he was not going to make it out of that. They always tell us that all the time. And he had a 8 or 9 hour brain surgery. His brain was literally, it had hemorrhaged and kind of went over to one side of his head. The whole left side of his head is like a metal plate where they had to do all that surgery. And here he is.
Yeah, and the surgeon said, I don't know how you're alive right now because you should be dead.
Yeah, and they told us he probably wouldn't remember who we were, know our names. The boy got up, as soon as they took the respirator out, he wanted a steak dinner, which is pretty fairly normal for Bryant. Whenever he has passed and they brought him back, the first thing he asked for is
food.
Food. Literally, I have papers where he has been resuscitated back, and the first thing he does is feed me. I just want a steak, and it's just insane. So it's going to be amazing just sharing that alone. It's a testament that if you, we are people of faith. You cannot tell us there is not a God, because as many times as we have saw his hand on Bryant's life, there's definitely a God, because there's no doubt about it. That's why we talk about rhythms of grace.
And after my brain surgery too, I had like a ton of clots in my lungs as well.
That's right. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. You forget with all this stuff. So yeah, after his brain surgery, he was released from the hospital, right? Mm-hmm. And then he had so many clots hit his lungs, and with some of the heart condition that I talked about, he had what they called a Fontan surgery and a modified Fontan, which is where they reroute your blood system. And so Bryant gets most of his oxygen saturation through his lungs. His blood system literally reroutes through his lungs and then pumps into his body. And the blood clots had shut off all the lobes to his lungs except for one lobe. And at that time, again, not just having the brain hemorrhage, he made it back from that just fine. You know, he was in the hospital, he got released, But then here you had all these blood clots hit his lungs and shut off everything except for one lobe. And they literally were like, if you have a pastor, call him. If you have family members, call him in. He's not going to make it out of this. And then he made it out of that. God has just touched his life. And so we have just amazing God stories throughout his life, that he's just like the Timex, taking a look and keep on ticking. But however, with that, like I said, when we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, there has been challenges with those stories. There's been depression, trying to find your purpose in life, right?
Yes.
And so we want to talk about all of that. It's great, how we hear people talk about all the time miracles. Bryant's life is truly a miracle, but there's also the challenges of, the medical bills and the trying to find your purpose in life and, the challenges, but life is a miracle and you're journeying it out along the way. So we hope, again, that you will come along with the Wynn family and join our crazy train, which is good. It's not that crazy. We're pretty fun. So again, I'm Andrea Wynn, and this is
Bryant Wynn.
And my husband, who cooks all the time, he's in there cooking. He's Bobby Wynn. And then you have a sister who's Megan.
Yeah, Megan. And then I have a brother named Caleb. And I have a niece named Lily.
Lillian Elizabeth. And then my daughter's husband's name is Jeff. So hopefully we'll be able to have all of them on. And yeah. So again, just to kind of sum everything up, because I don't know how much time we've even been. We just want to encourage families with kids or adults who have extraordinary abilities by sharing our journey. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then eventually, we're going to go in more detail of the story. This is just the introduction. But we'll definitely go into detail with that and all the surgeries and all that good stuff, and the bad and the ugly.
Good, bad, and the ugly. But a lot of good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a lot of good. I wouldn't trade my life for anything. I would still go through this. I've had other pregnancies that have had challenges. I know when, Bryant was born 30 years ago, he was our first child. And then after he was born, they wanted to do genetic studying done. They called and would ask tons of questions because they were trying to see, if it matched anything else with other kids born with that condition, to try to see if it was genetic. And they told us at the time that they didn't feel that it was. However, there's another family member that has the same type of heart condition, with some variances. And so we found out that it was hereditary within the family. In our particular family, I know that that's not always the case, but it is in ours. So when it comes to like my children, for example, they do have to get some testing done when they have their kids. My granddaughter was born healthy, but I've had numerous other pregnancies that miscarried, whether they be within the first few weeks or first few months, or further along. So I think there's been approximately 4 to 5 other children that I've lost in various months of pregnancy. And they weren't sure if it could have been the same thing or for various other reasons. So I'll be sharing that along the way. Because, sometimes you can have a family and you look at their situations and you say, oh, I have a problem, but I don't have that problem. But any situation that you go through can be challenging, but it depends on what you focus on. I think if you focus on the negative, then you're going to spiral down the tube,
Yeah.
wouldn't you say?
Definitely. You'll definitely spiral down a tube for sure. But you just want to stick with the positive and just climb yourself out of the negative and think about your life as being positivity. I mean, the world may view you a certain way, but in your heart, you can still do what you want to do.
Yeah. Because people put labels on you.
Yeah.
And people look at you like you're, oh, I feel sorry for you. Oh my goodness. You know, they say all kinds of stuff. I mean, but it's how you want to position your thoughts in your life.
And it's the way that people treat you too sometimes, depending. And you just tell them, hey, I want to be treated like everybody else.
Yeah. And I think for the most part, even when Bryant was first born, we did our best. You know, they always gave us the do's and don'ts. Bryant couldn't take gym class in school because when it came to physical stuff, he wasn't allowed to take gym class. You weren't allowed to do a lot of physical activity because you couldn't. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if we really told you can't do something. I think we allowed you to figure that out for the most part on your own. Like he wanted to try T-ball out, and we tried to do our best to say you can't do that as much as possible and let you figure that out. There's some stuff, I mean, we couldn't because he'd go, he'd climb all over the place when he was little. He was failure to thrive. I mean, he was in the hospital for a long time after you were born. He was born 7 pounds, 1 ounce. But when he got out of the hospital, he weighed 3 pounds because he just was so sick right after he was first born. And it took him a while to get on his feet. And 30 years ago, we didn't have home health care. So it was up to me to figure out how to do all of that on my own. He had an infection in his chest, and so I had to clean all of that out, and you were colicky, and I mean, I wish we had home health care, because, whew.
It would be nice, right?
Yeah, you were a handful, man. You acted like your dad. Just kidding. Actually, my mom said I was a bad baby because I had colic, but I'm still saying you acted like your dad, because you were, whew. You cried 24/7 when you got out of the hospital. I think it's because, they're in the hospital for so long that for months, and you don't hear, it's all the lights and the, in a hospital, it's...
I guess the environment changes well, but...
Yeah, and then you're in a house, and it was hard for me because I stayed in the hospital with you the whole time, and you don't hear the bells and the alarms, and... It was too quiet, and I think that people don't prepare you. But what helped us is there was this doctor, his doctors were Dr. Elkins in Oklahoma City and Dr. Razuk. And the one who did your modified Fontan was Dr. Not Craig. If you're still around, I love you. You guys were awesome. I was only 19 years old and a baby. And Dr. Razuk came into the room when you were born, and your dad, he was in the military, and I remember him saying, you guys really need to stick together, and you need to figure this thing out because this could make or break a marriage. And so if it's my first thing, I want to start out as a parent coming into this, if you're new to having a child with disabilities or extraordinary abilities, I want to give that to you. You have to be able to, communicate and not allow this to infiltrate it's going to infiltrate your relationship, but to make sure your relationship still takes a priority, because it can. And that doctor, that was so huge when he said that to us that day, because your life revolves around a medical condition. It really does. And we tried to do our best. I'm not saying, because, man, I'm telling you what, we could scrap. There are going to be people who know us, and they're like, yeah, those two, we surprised they're still married. So, because we could scrap. But outside of our relationship with God, and back then I don't even know if we really had one. honestly. I'm going to be honest about it. But we had so many people around us that supported us. And so I hope that this also falls on the ears of people that are family members or friends. If you have people around you with children or even adults with extraordinary abilities, just think about ways that you can help. Just do something simple. I had people in my life, and I hope this falls on the ears of Shelly Stevenson in Oklahoma. Her mom and her dad, I could cry even talking about this. It's going to be horrible if you do this online. Why did we video this? Everybody's going to see you cry right off on the first thing. Her mom and dad, Linda and Lowell Watts, they're in heaven now. Her dad passed actually when Bryant was still in the hospital. But I have a video of him holding Bryant. They came up to the hospital when you were first born. You're not supposed to cry on these things, are you?
Yeah, it's fine.
He's saying it's fine. Woo, let me get a tissue. Dawn, thank you for these tissues on the desk because you helping me out, girlfriend. So anyway, you don't even know some of these stories. You're going to learn stuff about yourself while you're on here.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? He's like, oh, God. So her mom and dad lived next door to us in the apartment. And if they were still alive, God, they'd probably tell you that me and your dad used to fight all the time next door to them in the apartments. It was funny, but not funny. It's funny now, but I'm sure when they were living next door to us, because we were young. I mean, I got married 17 and still in high school. What did I know? So, I know, right? So anyway, they lived next door to us, and, I didn't have my mom there. So when I had you, and they told me in the hospital, they helicopter flew you from where I had you to almost 2 hours away. And so Linda Watts, they just came back from a cruise, and literally they drove us all the way to Oklahoma City and stayed up there with me the whole time. And I had never met, I was young, and I never met anybody like these people in my life, to where Lowell, her husband, had passed, but yet that woman still stayed up. Even after burying her husband, she stayed up in Oklahoma City with me. And that was so God. At the time, I didn't have a huge relationship with the Lord, but it really showed me a picture about God that I carry with me to this day. I think about them all the time and how grateful I was for them in my life. Lowell used to, when you got out of the hospital, I took him up took you up to his hospital room when he was still in there, and he would hold you up there and said, "I'm going to be your guardian angel, little fella." Oh, so cute. Anyway, so I was grateful to have people like that, because trust me, I didn't know which end was coming or going. I didn't know what to do. He was my first kid. When you're a new parent, you don't know what you're doing anyways, let alone having some challenges. So it helps to have, I think sometimes the people around you don't know what to say or do, but you don't really need to know. You just need to, I think for us, we just need to know people are there. And so, yeah. And you just laid in the bed, soaking it all up. With big long toes that they said you could deal cards with. You're like, oh God. Anyway, so you see how this is going to start out. We're crazy. So yeah. And I think that's
it for now.
That's it for now.
Yeah.
So hopefully you'll enjoy some of our little stories, and you're going to really enjoy our sense of humor. And we can't wait to start this journey with you.
Hopefully you like and subscribe.
Yeah, so like and subscribe, share with all your friends and family. And so just share this post everywhere you go, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.